Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Portland Utility Board. This is a meeting of community volunteers tasked with advising council on items related to the Water Bureau and the Bureau of Environmental Services. And our call to order: under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is being recorded. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. All right, so PUB's beliefs, values, and anti-racist principles. PUB believes and acts upon anti-racist principles in our meeting spaces and interactions with PUB. While every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted towards people that are already made vulnerable by systemic inequities. This means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. And so everyone is empowered to speak up and speak out. We are empowered to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board, and we want to focus on the impacted individual or population, condemning the conduct, not the person. All right, I think I'll pass it over to Amy.
All right, thank you, Robin. My name is Amy Archer Masters, and I'll quickly run through the meeting guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, the person you're addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by me, PUB staff, so please limit to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public comment or asking for technical assistance or reminding us that you've been waiting to speak if you've not been called on. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board, and I may lower your hand once you've begun speaking just to maintain the flow of the conversation. During public comment periods, the public can also raise their hand and you'll be called on when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, you may need to press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on when speaking. If desired, it is not required. Please mute your microphone when not speaking, and if you're connecting by phone, you can press *6 to mute or unmute. Public comment will be taken during the comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through the chat with myself or raise your hand during the comment period. It's also available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. As mentioned, the meeting is being recorded. I will pass it back to you.
All right, so everyone, this is our agenda today. The main thing that we will be focusing on is actually what we want to put in that second and final budget letter. Things that haven't quite been, or things that have been mentioned, but that we want to dig a little deeper. And I think that'll actually take up the majority of our time today. And hopefully by the end of our conversation, we'll have convinced two of you lovely people to actually volunteer to craft the draft of that final budget letter from PUB, which we will hopefully be able to do a final vote at our next meeting. And that will be the finalization of our budget submissions, I believe. For this round of budgets. So yeah, let's get started. Does anyone have a disclosure of communications that they need to make? I'm not hearing anybody. So let's move on to our public comment section. Amy, do we have any public commenters today?
I've not received any in advance and nothing by chat.
All right, as long as there are no members of the public currently that want to make a comment, it looks like we can move specifically to what we came here to do, which is finalize pub's budget work. As I said before, the goal for today is really to develop and improve recommendations that are going to go into that second budget letter and identify volunteers for drafting and editing the letter. I was able to have a conversation with Karen, and I thought that she made some really good points about we're not necessarily going to be reciting the exact same thing that we said in the last budget letter. This is kind of flushing out points that we've made, but not necessarily regurgitating the same items. And this document should be able to stand alone on its own. So let's be mindful of that. And I also thought that they made a key point of being mindful of where is the discretion and where do we not have discretion. I thought that was a really great point to stay focused as we go into this. So looks like Amy has got our proposals on the screen, and it looks like this is just building off of that same document that we've been working on previously. And so let's get started. Looks like the first topic is really going to be getting into workforce development. And we have a couple recommendations on screen, and we want to see if we want to really flesh them out any further, or if we feel that that area is just kind of resolved and not necessarily needs to be touched on this final one. So looks like the first potential recommendation for workforce development is support the full-time employees ads in the Portland Water Bureau Employee Investment Program offer, but question why they are limited terms, including more detail about increased resources about employee lifecycle support programs. And the second one is talking about supporting investments in BES's technology services and information services and mapping program offer. But it looks like we do have possibly some concerns about a couple of positions being repurposed and making sure that we have geographic representation in investments, maintenance, and service areas. So if anyone wants to raise their hand, or anything on here we need to specifically flesh out more, or any comments? Go ahead, Karen.
Yes, thanks, Robin. I was just going to chime in and sort of own these comments. These are a couple of things that I had noted when I was reading through the budget. So it sounds like there's general support by not hearing any opposition from pub members. So thank you for that. And I just wanted to know, I would be fine with, fairly general references. I had mentioned some quite specific programs there that piqued my interest. And, depending on the length of the budget letter, I would be fine if these sentiments were somewhat generalized and maybe specific positions were noted as examples. So I'll just, all I wanted to say on those topics.
All right, thank you, Karen. Does anyone else have something to build on or off of? It looks like Tom has their hand raised. Go ahead.
I'm just not quite clear or understand the second portion of the sentence. The first part is saying we support it. I don't know what we're asking when we say includes more detail about increased resources for employee life cycle support program. I don't actually know what the life cycle support program is, so I'm wondering. It seems like we have a recommendation with a question in it. So should there be a period after limited term and then ask for more detail about the next piece?
Robin, is it okay if I respond to that?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at, Tom, that when I said that I would be fine if these comments were somewhat more generalized. I did have some questions and would like to learn more about the employee life cycle support program. It was something that was called out in the this particular program offer that talked about employee investment. But like I said, I don't necessarily need to ask for that detail in the budget letter.
Right, okay.
So might just, say something, and again, not trying to get into wordsmithing at this point, but I just, for whoever does volunteer to help put the letter together, I was just saying I would be fine if these comments were kind of generalized and specific positions were mentioned as, for example, we support programs like this and, would like to learn more or may have questions for, but again, I don't want to get into wordsmithing here, but I just wanted to respond to your suggestion to make things more clear in wording and say that I would support that for whoever ultimately drafts the letters.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you both for that. I would like to put on my just my pub member hat and specifically say I think I had brought up in one of the individual conversations that I had with a board member the possibility of a recommendation discussing filling vacancies, like focusing on filling vacancies and adding some extra positions, but possibly not adding as many new positions. And my interest for that was specifically because during the last pub meeting, it was mentioned that there are positions that are not currently filled. And so I was trying to essentially figure out, are those positions really important, or are those positions available? They're just not necessarily super necessary currently. And is it more important to have the new positions? And so I wasn't sure if we wanted to make a possible proposal around making sure that we're focusing also on the vacancies and not just adding new positions that may also still be vacant. Co-chair hat back on.
Robin, this is Amy, if I could just add or point out, I think that during the presentations from the bureaus, we have heard that is something that they are doing and focusing on, and that the vacancy that they are maintaining are primarily, for maybe limited periods of time in order to mitigate budget impacts. But so I guess I would just suggest if there's a recommendation, maybe that it's in the tone of supporting, that effort to fill vacancies or identify. I think what they had said is that they repurpose those vacancies and figure out if there's higher priority work. Instead of adding a new position, they shift that work to the vacancy.
All right, and thank you for that clarity. I'm not seeing anyone else shout out about workforce development. Of course, we can always come back to this topic if something comes across your mind. So perhaps it would be best to jump to the climate justice and seismic resilience portion to see if we need to flesh that out at all. Looks like there's really only one current proposal on the screen, which is that the pub would likely just want more explanation about the Water Bureau's capital projects, their response to the 2017 seismic study, and it looks like actually just a specific focus on seismic resiliency and if it's considered adequately in these prioritization decisions. Anyone have any thoughts on seismic resiliency, or just a general want to address climate, a general want to step one more step further into the climate discussion in the final letter?
Robin, this is Amy again, and while people are thinking of and potentially raising their hand, I just wanted to point out, because I pointed this out to the two chairs before we started, but I don't know if it was mentioned while I was doing other things. There are other climate justice and seismic resilience lower down on the list, so the content that you've already reviewed, discussed, provided input on are further down on this list and still documented. And so, you know, towards the end, we can figure out, you know, whether there's interest in still including those in the letter. I'm assuming that the content that was provided for the verbal testimony would also be stated in the letter, perhaps with a little bit more detail. So we'll get to those. These are, I just started on the list with those that hadn't been discussed yet or were unclear at the last time.
All right, looks like Tom has their hand raised. Hopefully they got some clarity for us. Go ahead.
On this particular item, and I guess it relates to everything, it's, again, instead of offering a recommendation, we're actually asking a question. So I think our question should go to the bureaus, not to City Council. So it would be, so I recommend that we structure this letter so we're either supporting something, not supporting something, or we're in the middle. But I don't understand why we're posing questions to City Council. So it seems those should go to the Bureau, and then the Bureau gets back to us regarding, for instance, this particular question.
Okay, I feel what you're saying, Tom. Yeah, in some way, I feel like this letter, it's like, I don't necessarily know if we should be asking more questions or if it's more of, these are our final statements and findings on what we've already discussed. And that was kind of how I was viewing it personally. I see Karen has their hand raised. Maybe they've got some clarification for us. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So this, again, I'm owning this one because this was one of my one of my contributions. And I would like to keep it, but I'm happy to, again, have it sort of reframed as a recommendation. And in fact, it came out of seeing some in the budget, right, for some projects, particularly noted that they were, had some like seismic resilience component to them, whether it was through the equipment that was being used or why they had been prioritized. And that was called out for some things. And it just made me question, I wonder if the seismic resilience is something that sort of routinely is one of the the factors that is considered in prioritizing particular projects. And that, so I think, my recommendation would be, make sure it is, right? And I could leave it at that, but it was, so again, yes, I would like more information about it. I don't need to ask for that information in the budget letter, but I do think I would like it still to be called out that that evidently is an element of planning and sort of asset management and that goes into budgetary decisions about which capital projects will be prioritized. And I would just like to recommend that continue to be a factor, right, in decisions.
Yeah, and I appreciate you making that into a proposal. I also value bringing attention to that because I feel in many ways the inevitable earthquake and the inevitable not the current climate issue, really it's often something that's kind of kicked down the road. And I've noticed that specifically with seismic, it tends to be one of the first things that we kind of push farther down. And if we're going to be focused on it, it always has to be part of the process. So I appreciate that. And I would definitely say that there's value in putting that in the next letter.
I would just like to add that I think we should do this relative to racial equity. That, for instance, asking the Bureau for any particular project, anything that's in the budget, how did they address racial equity relative to whatever the issue is? Just Because we talk about that, it's one of our values, but yet we never get information that says, okay, on such and such project, we did this, that, and the other to try to address racial equity, if, for instance, it even exists at that particular type of project. But at least they could tell us, did they put it on their list of criteria or items when they go through a project?
And Tom, clarification, is that specifically in relation to like climate and seismic resiliency, or are you saying that I think one of the topics that we had was like workforce development, and that was attached to our previous report about what it was like to be a worker under the bureaus? Are you specifically talking in relation to this part, or just in general, you think that that's something that we should be talking more of?
I'm using it not exclusive to seismic. I'm using it relative to any kind of capital project or operations and maintenance, but it's specifically more related to capital projects. And the neighborhood they're proposing to work in, issues related to the project and people in the neighborhood and things like that. But it actually applies kind of a blanket thing throughout both bureaus. It relates to human resources and everything else. But we've talked about that a lot in the past. So this is where I don't think we've really thought of this too much and applied it to at least have some kind of response about how the bureaus have looked at those issues relative to different projects that they're doing. And I'm sure they do, but it'd be good to just have it noted that we're covering that.
All right, thank you for that, Tom. Are there any other proposals just related to climate justice or seismic resiliency that we think is really imperative for this final letter before we go into capital investments? All right. All right, well then let's get started with capital and other investments, including health and safety. So give me just a second to actually read this before I say it. Actually, it looks like we've got a handful of proposals. If you'd like, I can read it. If not, just read it off the screen and raise your hand if you have any interest in specifically a proposal for how we can impact the budget directly through how we navigate capital investments. I'm gonna raise my hand, actually, let's go with Alexis first, and then I'll make a comment. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Robin. Yeah, I'm glad to see these in here. For S, the pub would like more information about. I think that is a similar kind of question or I have a similar question as to what Tom has raised here. Like, we want more information, or do we support these in our budget letter? I think we should be a little bit more specific. So I would love to hear people's perspectives on our support or concern about those. And then for V, concerned about a low investment in the gas pipeline replacement. Again, I wonder if this is one where we should be a little bit more specific and suggest higher investment in that replacement. And then just while I'm at it, I just want to do a strong support for R and T in particular.
All right, thank you for that, Alexis. And I think my comment was actually going to be related to which projects we wanted to possibly engage with for a proposal on our second letter. And I've had enough conversations with Tom about the Tryon Creek project that I do see value in making a proposal about not agreeing with the selling the land at a value of $1, especially when we are working with a budget and we're being told we've got to make ends meet, and we don't necessarily have a lot of extra money. I think that the information that the background that I've gotten, I feel like that is possibly a potent way for us to actually dive into something specific that would have a monetary effect on the budget. I see Chris has their hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say I think we should be asking less questions of council and more recommendations. Asking questions to the council, I think is not effective because they're not going to know. All they're going to do is kick it back to the bureaus to answer our questions. So I think we need to be more focused on, we recommend, we think this is a good idea, we don't think this is a good idea. Because this is going to council. This is our audience is council. It's not to the bureaus. So I think that questions need to be majority removed, and either we support this decision or we don't support, is what I think we should do.
I appreciate that. Looks like Karen has their hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, to that point, I was going to offer for number 5, which is kind of a string of questions and we'd like more information, that we might be able to turn it into a recommendation by mentioning particularly that, whoops, it just went away there, but the equity to the BES operations and maintenance program offer that mentions equity-centered mitigation strategies and related performance measures and outcomes. I think recommendations from us are important not only for dollar values, but for things like performance measures and performance measures and outcomes. So I would suggest a recommendation that we support performance measures and outcomes such as those that are mentioned in BES's blah, 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 blah program offer, mentioning equity-centered mitigation strategies. And I would just note that could maybe tie nicely with what Tom articulated in the group above about that might be a nice way to weave in our recommendation that, essentially any program, well, that was particularly about capital projects, but that any capital projects should be considering equity-centered mitigation strategies and performance measures. That it shouldn't be an add-on, it should just be part of the part of how projects are evaluated and prioritized. So anyway, I saw that there could be a connection there.
All right. And Amy, I think is there like a second page of capital projects as well that people might be able to bounce off a little bit as well?
Yeah, so this is the one that there was a lot of discussion about. So the notes go on for I think a page or a couple pages, where there was some back and forth about talking about specific projects versus more generalized statements. So I expect this probably will be a rich conversation. So.
I like the way you phrase that, rich conversation.
And maybe just as a reminder of where we ended, because the other pieces on this is what we decided, or PUB decided to put in the public testimony. So the testimony later this afternoon focused on just what was stated in the original budget letter. And so it didn't dive into details, but it just flagged, these are the projects that the board is, still particularly interested in. So if you want to do anything more specific, then that's the question that's up for the group is, do you want something more specific than what was agreed to?
Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to add to what Amy just said about sort of where we left off and where my recollection of the where we left the discussion last time was that there was pretty strong opinions on both sides about recommending particular projects for either delay or moving forward. Pretty strong opinions to say, hold these projects to save money, and also pretty strong opinions that said, no, these projects are important for, continuing to provide service and blah, 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 blah. And for addressing, intergenerational equity and, long-term planning and all those things. So it seemed to me like we as a group needed to decide, right? Sort of, yes or no, are we going into the weeds with recommendations on particular projects, or are we leaving it as a fairly general statement, like we want to continue to be involved and hear about these early and have an opportunity to influence, and so on and so forth. And I will chime in with an opinion on Tryon Creek and the selling the land for $1. I would not be comfortable myself as a board member with anything more than just questioning, stating that, we don't understand the reasoning behind that. And I think that's fair. Just stating that to us, if indeed everybody agrees with this, obviously, but stating that we're perhaps confused by that or don't really understand the reasoning. To us, it seems like that maybe could be a way that the city could be raising some more money, and they're not. And we question, or we don't understand that. I would not be comfortable us like second guessing, right, a decision, probably a strategic, legal, financial, negotiated decision. Obviously we weren't consulted on, and we didn't have a role in. So I would not be comfortable with us sort of second guessing that. But I would be comfortable with saying, hey, we had a lot of discussion about this at the board. We're confused by it. And, I'm not quite sure what the recommendation would be, other than, I'm not sure what the recommendation would be. So maybe that's what somebody else has an idea about.
And just to say, I like what you're saying on that, because it's maybe not necessarily a proposal, but we can at least state a general feeling that we have on it. And that we've had discussions on it. Looks like Tom might have a question or some clarifying information. Go ahead.
I just want to say that since I am making this proposal, I do agree with what Karen just said. And I do feel we are all different. So for instance, I can go with her suggestion, but I can also go with my proposal, because I don't mind. I don't call it second guessing. I call it in-depth analysis based on the limited information that the bureaus have given us. If they would give us more information, then we would have, we'd be a little bit more informed to make a more reasonable, or what, not even reasonable, a more informed decision. But since they haven't, and in all due respect to everybody on the board and these bureaus and the people that worked on this, I would like to say, so in crafting something that we're saying basically in this general context, asking City Council to ask the bureaus to look at the different projects they have, and such as, for instance, we could say such as Tryon Creek, automated meters, Willamette Crossing, and identify if those or other projects could be postponed. So this is saying, we're not saying they're bad projects. This is all relative to timing. So we're saying, could they be postponed until we can get, more or saving resources for the big giant stuff that's coming, which is really the filtration plant. And already we're experiencing lots of expense with STEP. So allowing the bureaus to be able to focus on those, use the money for that, and then look at whether it's these. So we're not saying that it is these projects, but we're saying it could be something like these projects. And when it comes to the land, I'm still, until BES tells us why they're selling it for $1, I'm opposed to it. But we don't have to put it in this letter. It's just me as a member saying that still, I just don't get it. And but anyway, so back to the same thing. In summary, just allude to these, but not necessarily say these are it, but these are things that we're wondering, could these or other projects that we're not even listing. And just for me, I'm not against any of these projects. It's the timing that I'm opposed to. So there's value in all these projects. Thank you.
Go ahead, Lorraine.
Thank you. As I reorient my stuff, I just have a comment. I am not either way with this. I just want to say that I think my concern lies in how the city, and I'm saying city meaning all the different bureaus, let me get my thoughts together. How the city look at funding infrastructure. And when I say funding infrastructure, is ensuring that there's a there's a process that incorporates how cities' infrastructure is maintained so that we get the best life cycle out of these projects, and that planning is done in a way that and I'm quite aware that it's dependent on funding at any point in time, but for some reason, and it may be my ignorance, that it seems to me that it is not what I'm exposed to now is telling me that it's not done it's not done in a way in a structure that affords that. I don't know if my thoughts are all over the place. So in other words, we have a term, and I'll introduce you all to my culture. It seems like it's vai. So what does that mean? It seems like it's like okay, if this is falling down enough, we're going to deal with it, and this could be pushed off. And I'm looking for a more structured way that is done. That and oh, my phone is ringing. Sorry about that. And that when and what I'm saying is that it goes back to that conversation. When we are looking at infrastructure, we have to look at life cycle. We have to look at the operating budget to maintain that life cycle. And I would like to see that kind of planning goes in so that these expenditures are anticipated and planned for, and it's not and prioritized based on that, so that those risks are assessed and incorporated, and it's not now, oh my God, which is the thing that's going to explode in our face or collapse on somebody, or end up with some situation where the sewer system goes down and back up into people's home, and then we have to deal with paying people for that kind of situation. So that is where I'm coming from, is that ultimately that is what I would like to see incorporated. So that's my talk. That's my thought on this.
Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, just to respond to Lorraine, I think those are great comments. And since I worked for the Bureau for 25 years or 26 years, and something that came up at the last meeting. So I think it was the last meeting where BES said that they are taking a certain amount of money out of their resources, and they're putting it aside to pay for the Portland Harbor expenses that are on the horizon that are coming. So they've got a little savings account for the Portland Harbor. So what didn't happen, and that's why we have this situation, and I didn't quite hear that phrase you used, Lorraine, but it's probably appropriate, is that over the decades since the city started charging sewer fees, they did not take a small amount out and put it into a capital, not capital, but into an operations and maintenance repair and replacement fund. And so that doesn't, to my knowledge, that doesn't exist. It's all in one general fund. So the policy that BES has, and I think Water Bureau, but policy is that if you live in a house and you're paying or you live in a building, you pay your sewer fees. That allows you to get repair of the sewer in front of your property or up and down the street, whatever it might be, at no direct expense to you because you've been paying your fees. And the theory is that part of that money went into repair and replacement of the system. But again, the Bureau didn't put that money away for repair and replacement of the system. It's just there, and the method they use. And as I stated, and they're doing about 10 miles a year, and they've actually got 2,500 miles of pipe, not 2,000. So how can they ever catch up with the current method? And I was encouraged to hear that somebody at BES mentioned at one of our last meetings that they are looking at trying to find new ways to fund these big capital projects where they have to go into the neighborhood and replace, a mile or two of pipe in a particular neighborhood because it's old and it's falling apart and it's posing problems to properties and things like that. So anyway, but I think if we could structure some way to say this to City Council, that would be great. I would really support that we are encouraging BES and Water Bureau to really look for new ways to finance and to have a savings account for this massive amount of repair that's required that, they haven't purposely deferred it. And when I first started at the Bureau, they didn't have the technology there to be able to identify how much broken pipe and stuff they had. And so the basic way that the Bureau worked back in the old days was when it broke, they'd fix it. And if it wasn't broken, which means the streets or complaints or whatever it might be, then they didn't do it. And so that's how they worked. It was the squeaky wheel gets to grease, as the old saying goes. But of course, now they have TV cameras, they go down, they try and figure out, what's about to break, try and catch it before it goes. But you can imagine 2,500 miles. It's a heck of a lot of pipe to look at and try and figure out what it's doing. But anyway, that's what they're doing. So sorry, took a lot of time.
I
Stop.
appreciate you, Tom. Just personal commentary. I think I brought this up in the last meeting, but that was, I think possibly what Lorraine is getting to is kind of making a greater commentary on the maintenance practices that the city uses currently, and how deferred, we're working under deferred maintenance, and how that system inherently is not the best system for maintenance or for cost. And so because we don't necessarily seem to have specific agreement on where we want to take money from, perhaps the commentary and proposals that we'll make for the capital projects will mostly be values based. Like, hey, we know that you have knowledge that we do not, but we specifically want to make sure that whatever choices are being made, they're made with specifically addressing affordability, racial equity, and climate. And that when we take a step back, we see that the maintenance practice of deferred maintenance is also causing part of our problem, which is that we can't really kick things down the road because we've been doing that this whole time. And I think that could be a quality commentary that relates to, that also directly relates to governance change. I'll let that marinate for a second. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hey everyone, Sarah Messier, ex officio member and Water Bureau staff. I really support both Lorraine and Robin's comments, and just want to provide sort of the Bureau speak of what you're talking about. It sounds like you're really wanting more information about our asset management planning, and how we balance risk, and when I say we, I'm meaning the bureaus, of how risk is assessed and how decisions are made based on those risks. And I know maybe last year there was a little bit of discussion or a presentation about asset management programs, but I think based on what I'm hearing, it just sounds like getting more information from the bureaus of not just what the program is, but then how that's applied in the deferred maintenance, in choosing CIP projects to move forward with, because some of these CIP projects are putting in new infrastructure. Some of them are updating old infrastructure that, as Lorraine was saying, are about to fail or at failure state. And so I super appreciate all of the thoughts and comments from everyone. I do want to also point out that, when we, the bureaus have made, decisions to move forward with certain CIP projects. And if we, as a pub, suggest to pause them or stop them and, do them later, we're actually suggesting that more money will be spent on those projects because inflation's only going to go up. So yes, we may save some money now, or have reduced bills now. However, that is also recommending that more money will be spent on those projects in the future, and still, and then that burden will continue for the future. So I just want to remind everyone that pausing things now would result in more costs later.
All right, I think as long as there's no current, any other recommendations, was there one more area that we at least wanted to touch on I think it was related to pub engagement, possibly. All right, cool.
Robin, I'm happy to take over facilitation if you want a break and.
Yeah, this would be a good place.
So just to bring us to sort of where we left this topic, just make sure, yeah, we're on chart, right? Where we left this topic at the end of our last meeting, which was agreeing on, alluding to and to the pub's opinions it has on charter reform and the extent to which I shouldn't say charter reform, sort of transition, right, to a new form of government. And we didn't exactly split, but we didn't come to a resolution on how deep we wanted to go into any recommendations regarding essentially how much resourcing the bureaus are putting into transition now, and our recommendations on that. So that's kind of where we left it. And as you can see from the notes here, there was quite a lot of conversation there. So it seemed like this was something we should circle back to and poll members about how much, how do you want this referenced in the final budget letter, if at all? And how much, or let's see, how much do you want referenced in the budget letter? And then we don't have to decide this today, but if we want to go into a lot more detail than what we're planning on putting in the budget letter, what's the forum for that? And a suggestion was made at the last meeting that we just do a whole separate letter to City Council on transition to new form of city government, and it doesn't need to get lost in the budget letter. So that's kind of where we left it. And what do people think? Yeah, Chris, please go ahead.
I would recommend something fairly broad from us, because we don't seem to have a strong continence one way or the other. Something sort of neutral, like that the council delay making major decisions until the new council arrives is what we're recommending, and not making any large decisions on things, to kind of run status quo as much as possible without delaying the whole will of the public. It obviously won't work if they all arrive January 1st and everybody's brand new to the job and not sure what's going to take place, and we're waiting for direction for them to what to do. The bureaus can't sit there and wait for months and months for the new council to form, new city manager to be brought online, and everybody to tell us what to do. So maybe something more broad like that, not real specific, but just a broad recommendation that they take things slow and don't make any large systemic changes until the new council has arrived.
Okay, how does that sit with everyone else?
This is Tom. I agree with that.
How about some other voices we haven't heard much from today?
Yeah, this is Heather, voting member. I also agree with that.
And this is Alexis. I agree with that as well. I think you said this, Chris, but I just did want to reiterate that I do think that we should follow up with council in writing with some more specificity at some point in the near future. But I think it's important that we iterate this in the budget letter.
Okay. Okay, thanks everybody for that. Do we, just throwing that out there, if you all want to go here, do we want to make any particular tie to resourcing money? 'Cause I'm hearing a broad recommendation to take things slow and delay major decisions. Is there an inherent sort of budget recommendation in that? Like, I mean, my recollection is there were some positions and responsibilities of positions in this 23-24 budget that were going to be you know, spending time on this transition planning. So I'm just throwing that out there. Is there anything more specific you all want to say about resourcing the transition to a new form of government, or do y'all feel like that's essentially inherent in a broad recommendation to go slow and delay major decisions? Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I think it is in what you just now said, that if we make a general statement like Chris suggested, that we don't have to get into too much, but along the lines of why would we make this statement? From my perspective, we're making the statement because, one, we want to protect the two bureaus that we're supposed to oversee and not have them distracted and pulled away from their responsibilities, which isn't to say that they shouldn't do anything, but it's just to say we want to make sure that we protect those two bureaus from unnecessary distractions and efforts and expense, because they're going to have to pay people to do something that's not part of their everyday job as they're doing this. And then the other thing is to respect the fact that the voters voted for this new governance and these new people to be making decisions about how the city works. And so it's those two things, and respecting the will of the voters, and let the new council, hopefully they'll make better decisions, but maybe not, but leave it to the new council to make major decisions and things like that. Basically what Chris said, so.
Very good. Any more thoughts on that one? Okay, thanks everybody for that. So I believe now we're really at the place where these are the items that we discussed in some detail enough to have a talking point in our verbal testimony that's going to be delivered in a few hours here. So we have a few minutes that we can run through these topics and just see if you all want to have more detail in the letter, the final budget letter, than what you're seeing up on the screen. I guess maybe that's a good way to say it. Is there going once, going twice? Is there anything else on these topics that you want us to call out specifically in the budget letter? That's what my question for you is. Okay, Alexis, please go ahead.
Yeah, can I just, a clarifying question is, will our original budget letter and then our written testimony be attachments to the second letter? Because there are things in here that's a little bit, I'm just wondering if we need to be repetitive and ensure that it is said multiple times. some of these, the things that will be said in written, in verbal testimony today, is it important that we also get that in writing in order to really emphasize these points, or will it just be an attachment to our second letter and we can refer to that? Does my
Yeah.
question make sense? Sorry, I'm babbling.
Sure. I think so. So you tell me if my answer makes sense, but so the final budget letter will contain everything that we're saying in the verbal testimony. I mean, not exactly word for word, but you know, the topics and the sentiments. Yes, they will be we're already planning to make sure that those are in writing in the final budget letter.
Okay, perfect.
To our first budget letter that you referred to, Alexis, we weren't, I mean, that's on the record. So we weren't planning on, let's say, attaching that to our final budget letter. But we can certainly make reference to it. And I think we do in a couple of cases, and even in our verbal testimony today. We're referring back to, as we said in our first budget letter, you know, that kind of thing. So if there's something that you think you particularly want to reiterate or emphasize or remind council, this was in our first budget letter. Yeah, let's think about that, and let's make sure and get your opinion out that, yeah, I want us to reiterate this, so we don't lose it. Right? We don't forget it or something. And I guess sort of last thought on that, because sometimes things occur to you, you know, and they might not occur in the next 20 minutes here. The plan is for us to take what we get today, right? Everything y'all are talking about and the notes that Amy's madly typing away. Get, again, a couple volunteers to work with Amy to weave all this together into a letter, and then send that letter out to the full board, you know, at least a few days before our April 4th meeting, so that we can finalize the letter at the April 4th meeting. So I guess what I'm saying is we don't have to have perfect words, and you don't have to think of every last thing today, luckily, because we do have a little bit more time to massage and get a final letter together. So yeah, so let me be quiet, give you all some space to think, and chime in if you want to add anything to what you're seeing up on the screen. Have at it, Robin. What do you think?
Yeah, I wanted with this, I guess what I wanted to make a proposal with was specifically, both bureaus talked about increase in like central costs across the city, and they were talking about how like it was more expensive to drive cars around, and how that wasn't like fleet and company cars that was an increase that we saw in the budget. So a possible proposal could be saying that we recognize that there is a mandate specifically to electrify a certain percentage of the city's fleet, and that based on the rapid increase of inflation with gas prices causing the fleet specifically to increase a lot in cost, that we would suggest increasing the mandate to a higher number to try to offset those increased costs, specifically with central services.
Can you say more, Robin, about the mandate that you're referring to? What?
So I don't have a lot of, Yeah, I actually don't have a lot of information on the mandate. In the middle box, just on the screen here, it says my comments about noticing that the fleet costs were going up, and a pub staff had commented that there's an existing mandate. And so I don't necessarily know where the line is, but it sounds like gas prices are going up caused by inflation, and that maybe increasing the mandate level could assist in reducing those central costs. But we would need to look up that mandate.
Maybe, I know Amy's multitasking here, so once you're done typing, I might want to turn to Amy and ask if maybe that was in reference to like the city's climate action plan, or if there was, yeah.
The Bureau staff may have more specific. So if one of them is in the room, I certainly would welcome you to speak up. But I know that, so I haven't touched it directly since I was in their roles in bureaus at the city, but I know that there were commitments that the city made to the purchase of electric vehicles where possible, and making a commitment related to that. I will defer to Chris because he has his hand raised and may have more information about that.
I would recommend, I see Ken Bartacci is here. He's the BES finance person. He might know. And my boss, actually, John Maloney, he's the accounting manager. They might be able to give us answers as to what the increase in costs were for the overhead. Can maybe one or both of you unmute and tell us where the increase in cost came from Central?
Hi, this is Ken. I'm sorry, I was listening from afar, but can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the $2 million increase we got from OMF for overhead costs and stuff like that. Some of it was fleet and stuff. What was the specific increase in cost that we had not anticipated? Because whatever it was, it hit water as well. So
Right. No, yeah, we forecast at the rates that we get from the city economist. I kind of spoke to this last time, and what's happening with the city and the internal rates came in much higher than the region that the economist uses. So it was across the board. It was for procurement. It was for technology services. It was across the board. It was things that they're doing to improve the system that ended up just costing us more, and we weren't prepared, or we wouldn't forecast it. So
maybe it would be helpful for everyone here to know what are the central costs. You and I both know what those are, but not all the board members may know what those are.
I don't have them all right in front of me, but it's anything from printing, distribution, fleet, technology services, facilities. Those are the ones that come to mind right now.
Central accounting, purchasing, BHR is all central services as well. So any of those people could have increased their cost and passed it on to the bureaus, if that helps.
This is Robin. I just want to say I wrote down some notes. I think it was when Cecilia was presenting about what specifically was increasing. So they at least highlighted that facilities were really were increased a lot, technical support increase, and fleet risk management. But they specifically highlighted facilities, technology, and fleet. And it felt like the fleet might be the easiest way, possibly easiest and quickest way to address or try to offset that unexpected costs. And I believe Farshad was the other person that was speaking during that conversation. And it sounded like BES and Water Bureau were essentially kind of seeing the increases in both areas, but just specifically fleet was noticed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of factors, and we had some union negotiation settlements, and we're also seeing some changes to the models and how some of the central services operate. So there's a variety of reasons behind it, but it just we just weren't prepared for it.
And I see Cecilia's come on camera, so please go ahead, Cecilia. And I just want to throw out a question and see if this is getting at what maybe Robin is getting at. it is inherently, Robin, what you're asking is, could increased electrification of the city's fleet reduce some of these higher overhead costs that presumably when we're talking about fleet, we're talking about more gas, higher gas prices. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yes.
Okay, and now I'll be quiet and I'm sure Cecilia has some information to share with us.
Yeah, the city is transitioning to having more electric vehicles, and what's driving some of the increases to the interagency that we received is putting in those charging stations that needs to be put in to have more electric vehicles. And then also, I think Ken mentioned this, is the change in methodology in how we're charged for maintaining vehicles. So I think when it was, the standard card, they're maintained differently than EV cars would be maintained, and that methodology changed. That is driving some of the increases that we're seeing as we understand it from fleet services. So I think to your question, Robin, they are working to transition to EV, having more EV vehicles. I don't know if that even increasing it more, at least in the short term, will help reduce the cost, maybe over long term, but increasing, even accelerating or expanding on what is planned would likely result in actually more costs in a near term. It's one of those where it costs money to invest to result in potential savings down the road.
And Cecilia or Ken, can you speak to the what we have been referring to as a mandate, or is there something in city policy where there's a target for fleet electrification, or a percentage, or a timeline that you're trying to electrify the fleet by?
There might be, and I know definitely there's a goal that they might have said. I just don't have that information.
Me
Okay, well, that gives us a lot more information than we had a few minutes ago. So thanks everybody for that discussion. I think we can work that into a recommendation. Sorry, Jeff Winter from Water Bureau. Looks like maybe you have some information for us.
Yeah, just to point out, I think as we sit here today, we probably have about a dozen vehicles fully electric on order. As you might imagine, supply has been impacted. We also have a project to install 26 charging stations over at our maintenance and construction campus. So we are working on it, but slower than probably what everybody would have liked it to be.
Thanks, Jeff. And I'm thinking it sounds like we could work this into a recommendation to, support the investments, something that the city is making in its fleet electrification, and, support the forward thinking to get there faster if we can for long-term cost savings, something. But I'm not quite sure that gets, and perhaps I'm not quite sure, Robin, how to work in your concern about how that ties to the increase in overhead costs. I'm hearing that certainly in the near term, like next couple of years-ish, there might not be a lot of effect that further fleet electrification would have on overhead costs, except to maybe increase them a little bit. But I certainly think we have enough here for a good recommendation on paying attention to fleet electrification and that's connection to not only climate resilience, but certainly a recognition that how overhead costs are calculated is perhaps a little out of date and needs we need a little bit more progress or sort of updating of those calculations and so forth. I made a mess of that, but I got a thumbs up from Jeff, so maybe that kind of made sense. Okay, we're getting down to the end of our meeting here. Let's see, communications, materials, financial assistance, and is that, yeah, that's the end. No, that's not the end. That's almost the end. Financial is, no, we're never at the end. Workforce development, there's a lot of stuff that we already talked about last time.
A
Yeah,
lot of the
so-
rest is stuff that is incorporated into the talking points. So as
Right.
you mentioned, we'll turn those into pieces in the written letter, and then probably the final feedback or edits on those can take place in the draft letter. So it's probably,
I think that's a better.
unless there's something that folks specifically felt like they wanted to go deeper into than was discussed previously.
Okay, perfect. Let's plan on not going through line by line at all, but just let's give 4 minutes, sort of opening the floor if there's anything someone wants to call out or emphasize or reiterate on some of the points that we made on climate resilience, climate justice, and I think financial assistance programs and workforce development. I think were the three topics here. Any burning things that folks want to make sure that we call out or reiterate? Go ahead, Tom.
Just quickly, I just wanted to mention that BES is coming out with its rate proposals. I think Amy's going to send us something on that. I got a heads up from an organization I'm in that was notified by BES that there's going to be public meetings about it and stuff like that. So I think as we've referenced tiered approaches and some other issues related to the rates. And so I just wanted to mention to everybody that this is something that will be on our agenda soon. And I guess maybe Amy can tell us more about whether the Bureau is going to come give us a presentation or not
Yeah,
in the
we'll
future.
Well, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll circle back to that at the end, Tom, but thanks. for-
I'm just bringing it up because the rates do relate to the budget and
Exactly,
everything
yeah.
else. So I don't have anything more specific than what we've already got.
Okay. Anybody else? Teresa, Lorraine, Alexis, Heather, anything else you want to get on the table before we wrap up? Okay. Not seeing any indication of that. So our next job is yet again to look for a couple folks who really like to write and play with words and help Amy pull this together into a letter for the rest of us to review. I haven't volunteered yet for any of this. I don't think maybe the first budget letter I did, but I'll throw my hat in there to work with you, Amy, to help pull this into a letter. But it would be great to have always another set of eyes, and different perspective is really valuable. So is there anyone else that would be willing to spend, I don't know, maybe a couple hours over the next couple weeks? Is that a volunteer hand question? A volunteer hand, Alexis, or a question?
It's a volunteer hand.
Yay. Thank you. Thanks a million. That's great.
Yay, excellent. Thank you both.
Okay, so I think that feeds into the timeline. So yeah, probably don't need to look at that slide again. I think I already said that. Okay, so if you all missed it, we're actually Lorraine and I will be delivering, doing best we can to deliver your, our collective thoughts and recommendations on the budget today in about 3.5 hours or so. And yeah, Lorraine, if I can have 5 minutes of your time before you sign up, that would be great. But so we can do a little last minute planning. If you want to listen in, is there a public link for that, Amy, if folks wanted to
It
listen?
is on the eGov PDX, so on the YouTube channel, you can view it, or if you go to the main city website, but I can send the link out as soon as we're done.
Okay.
So that everybody has that easily accessible. I will also, there'll be a recording of it afterwards, so you don't have to watch it live. I can share the full presentation after that's published on their website. So I will send that out with future communications as well.
Cool. Thank you. That's great. Okay, so that's that. And oh, I'm sorry, Lorraine, go ahead.
Karen, are you going to be there in person?
Oh, no, I'm not. I'm sorry. I didn't even realize that was an option.
Either works. So the Zoom link, and it's fine for one of you to be in person. We can talk about that at the end of the meeting if you'd like.
Oh,
Okay, cool.
yeah. And so maybe, but it depends on. Boy, I'm glad you brought that up, Lorraine.
The timing is challenging when you have this meeting on the same day. So
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, good. Like I said, we're doing a little last minute planning here. Just to wrap up our meeting now, though, as Tom alluded to, BES is going to be putting together some community forums regarding the rate study. And yes, we very much would like to have some input onto what those community forums look like. And BES would like to come and ask us about that on April 4th, which is our next meeting. So that's, that's coming up. Did I miss anything on the pretty pink flower slide, Amy?
No, that was the last
Okay.
of the announcements, although certainly open the floor for everybody. I just jumped to this one just to highlight that. So the next meeting, it's the combination of finalizing the letter. There may be some other topic if there's time, and then a brief update from BES on the outreach. And then there's also the request from BES to do the same kind of engagement session that they're doing with these other stakeholder groups at the upcoming pub meetings as well. So that's a potential agenda item for the April 20th, unless folks desire another topic. But since it was already on your priority list for near future, and we had tentatively slated it to happen sometime this spring, and it is now upon us. So.
All right, that sounds great. And I just want to flag something else for people to be thinking about, because I do think it relates to this, the bigger conversation about city government transition and what, not only what will the bureaus look like, right? But also what will the Bureau advisory bodies look like, which is us. Right. So maybe not April 20th, depending on how it works out. If BES really does want and need our full meeting time. But what we might want to start talking about at April 20th is our own transition, right? How we the pub want to be involved in any transition work that the city is doing now, but also thinking ahead to what we want or think an advisory body to the water bureaus, right? BES and Portland Water Board. What is our vision for what that advisory body might look like when we're not reporting to, or we're not advising commissioners anymore. because there won't be commissioners of the bureaus. So that is important for us, I believe, because we have members whose terms are ending at the end of June, and normally in, well, whatever normal is anymore, but in over the past, half dozen years or so, we would have been well into recruiting new members for another, the next term. And we haven't done that this year for a lot of reasons. And I think we need to have a collective discussion about what is recruitment for pub and for the seats that would otherwise be vacant, right, at the end of June. What should that recruitment look like this time period, right, this spring? And should we be doing things, differently than the way we've always done them, because things aren't going to be like the way that they've always been. So just kind of, I want to put a pin in that, and maybe we can start those discussions on April 20th, but we're probably going to need to start those discussions pretty darn soon. So I will leave it at that. Any other closing remarks from anyone on the board, or from Amy, or for Robin before we adjourn? Okay, fabulous. Thank you all very much. Hope you can tune in or listen to the work session a little bit later. And I think we can adjourn the meeting, maybe end